Joining us now from New York City is Dr. Nazie Moinian. She is an associate fellow for the Middle East Institute, which is, down the middle. It's not an ideological thing, which is what we don't want here, all right? And that seeks to increase knowledge of the Middle East. All right, so you read my column, you heard my monologue. Where am I going wrong here, Doctor?
Thank you. Nice to be on your show, Bill. My brother was a huge fan, always talked about you. You're not going anywhere wrong. I think you hit the nail on the head on many points. I'm not a nuclear expert. It's not on my resume, but I know a few things to be able to address some of the data you just shared with us. The weapons-grade uranium and how far was Iran away from producing a bomb or 3 bombs or 6 bombs for that matter is not up for debate. According to David Albright, who's a nuclear expert, who's a physicist, he founded the Institute for Science and International Security. Iran was about 3 to 4 weeks away from producing 4 to 6 weapons-grade payloads.
But how would he know? How would he know?
Because, that's a great question. And I wanted to tell you that the IAEA inspectors were in Iran. They were kicked out and they were deceived on many levels, but they were kicked out. And now Iran is bragging that it has given up its nuclear weapons to the Americans because it's letting the inspectors in. The inspectors were always supposed to be in, by the way, as part of the NPT.
They got booted out in 2019. So that's 7 years ago.
No, they were there until 2024 when I read the last report by David Albright, where they actually swapped many facilities. They found a 60% isotope, which is not supposed to be there. And they were not allowed to enrich up to that level. And from 60% isotope to a weapons-grade uranium, which is about 95%.
Okay, but I'm glad you pointed out those inspectors were not allowed to go to see any kind of uranium lab or any kind of like that. They did glean that Iran was cheating, and that was under Trump. I'm sorry, that was under Biden. It was under Biden, and it was an extension of the Obama deal with them. So that's why Trump, when he came in, he did it twice. He knocked him out the first time because he didn't like the deal. He said nobody can verify. And then the second time, he used military action in coordination with Israel to try to kill these people because they were violating. But I'm not a doubter in the sense that I know, based upon, I had an IAEA inspector on this program.
Right.
So pretty much what you're saying. Okay, but there's no 100% surety, and the opposition to Trump worldwide, not just in the US, doesn't believe it because they don't want to believe it. Would that be accurate?
Yes. Also, what's very accurate is that you can never get a surety out of the Islamic regime. It thrives on obfuscation and confusion, and letting its hands open for the world to see what they're up to, how much missiles they're producing, how many drone factories they have, how much nuclear enriched uranium they have, is a death knell for them. So they keep their cards very close to their chest.
But they're going to have to do it. Because Trump is not going to make a deal unless they allow weapons inspectors in. Now they'll play hide the mole, hide it here, hide it there. You know what they'll do. All right. But part of the deal is there are going to be weapons inspectors go in and look at their uranium capacity. Has to happen, or Trump's legacy is severely damaged.
I agree. And it will happen. For us Iran watchers, and unfortunately the synonym for Iran watchers is Iran cynics, because we know what they're all up to, not the Iranians, but the regime, is that for every performance we can verify, for every performance we can gauge to understand how far along they've gone, there is almost certainly a clandestine nuclear activity somewhere else that
Yeah,
we haven't been able
no
to
doubt about it.
identify. Right, right.
No doubt about it. But once you let people in to take a look around, you are in a much stronger position than they are now. The free world is now. Why do you think you've been doing this for a while, Doctor? Why do you think Europe and I mean the Gulf states are with the USA? Israel is separated because of the prohibition on them over, what did Trump say? The phrase he used was reacting too harshly. So they're kind of to the sideline now. They'll come back. But what is your reaction to why isn't everybody aligned with the United States trying to get these guys under control in Iran?
Well, I share your sentiments, Bill, that there was a wedge driven by the Iranians, by the Hezbollah, between Bibi and Trump, and the media jumped on that and made it much more magnified, more than it needed to be. But I'm reminded of World War II, 1940 to 1944. Charles de Gaulle of France and Churchill of England fought bitterly between themselves because they differed on war aims, exactly how Bibi and Trump are differing on war aims. Should it be a regime change, or should it be just a weakened Iran so we can get a better deal out of them? But they ultimately knew that the enemy is Hitler, which needs to be defeated. And they collaborated and we won the war. I'm not worried about the relationship between Bibi and Trump. They're both very hard-headed, very strong personality world powers, and Israel is a regional power. That set aside, I think the Europeans, I'm reminded of my great mentor at my grad school, Robert Jervis, who always said, if you want to know where the country relies on, what the country relies on when it comes to foreign policy, look what tools they have in their toolbox. Americans have military power. We're the largest military power in the world. And it was showcased during all the operations, Epic Fury, Midnight Hammer, everything that has gone down since. Europeans were there in 18th, 19th, and part of 20th century. They're no longer there. So they rely on diplomacy because everything else is too costly for them.
Yeah, but look, all the president asked of them was to allow our military to refuel on their territory.
Right.
Yeah, he wanted a couple of ships from Great Britain, and that never happened. But it wasn't, look, you guys got to partner up and send your bombers in there. No, it was a very, very sensible request that was rejected outright by a very weak continent. And and to this day, Trump's furious about it, absolutely furious that these NATO people, whom we protected now for 50 years, would then turn their backs on something that's dangerous. Iran's a dangerous terrorist state. Nobody can deny that. Mm-hmm. And yet these people are looking away. I mean, I wrote a book called Confronting Evil, and I said in a book, evil grows when you look away. And you're not going to let American military planes land on your soil or refuel? I mean, it's crazy.
It is. And I understand that you're angry. I was angry when Keir Starmer rejected the landing of allowing the American planes to land on British soil. I don't have an answer for that, unfortunately. I think this is a stain on collective European foreign policy establishment. They know that Trump will step up and do what it needs to be done militarily, and they're not willing to do it because somebody else is doing it for them.
Well, it's true, but that's so venal and so corrupt and so destructive to the rest of the world because these guys are killers. And again, there's no debate on that. I mean, they're going to light up Lebanon, and I think Hamas is pretty much done, but they can make a comeback at Iran's request. They're going to start again, and Iran's going, well, we're not doing it. So anyway, It's just a mess. Last word on this. I am a bit more optimistic today than I was on the weekend, over the weekend. I do think there's a good chance now that the Iranians will make a deal. You?
Optimism is a hazard in my profession, Bill, if you understand what I mean. We always tend to be on the side of cautious optimism, a little bit cynical, a little bit too realistic when it comes to the Islamic regime. I want your viewers and listeners to take the point away by listening to this conversation that obviously they know that the Islamic regime does not represent the Iranian people. 80 to 90% of the Iranian people are America-loving, Western-loving technocrats who are highly educated. They're perfectly happy to belong to the Western orbit. And it's the dream that's been hijacked by the Islamic regime. And the Gen Z of the Iranians right now is in revolt. And the people you see on the street are Gen Z and sometimes their parents. But it's known that this regime, if not targeted and gone away by the coalition of Arabs in the Gulf and the operations, the kinetic operations of the Americans and Israelis, it might implode on its own illegitimacy and unpopularity, which is something the Iranian Gen Z is hoping for.
Okay, but remember now, 250 years ago, we had a fight for our freedom here, and more than 200,000 colonists went down. And so the Iranians can sit there all day long and say, we don't like the mullahs, but they're going to have to do something themselves, whether it be a general strike. There are ways to do without getting a rope around your neck. But we're not seeing that. And I don't know if we're going to see it. Certainly the U.S. government's not counting on that anymore. They did in the beginning.
Yeah.
But they're not anymore.
It's hard to risk your life, Bill, if you're confronted by ammunition that's military style ammunition and you're riddled with bullets to the tune of 30 to 40,000 people over a 9-hour period, 3 days, but 9 hours.
I understand, but we had to do it. Other cultures had to do it. As I said, there are other ways than going out into the street, put yourself in physical jeopardy, but we're not seeing much. Anyway, Doctor, thanks for the good discussion. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Really, thank you.